Hello, everyone. I am Ivy Corvus, and today I have a special guest. I am so excited because Mortellus is joining me to talk about necromancy. And I've been dying for this interview. I'm not going to lie. I've been a little bit nervous because I just finished your book, The Bones Fall in a Spiral. It's amazing. I cannot wait to talk about all the things in this book. You can even see like my
I
little
love your emotional support tabs. I love it. I'm the same way.
emotional support tabs for sure.
I'd show you one of mine.
Oh my gosh, yes, show me. Yes. I love it so much.
This book isn't my favorite, so a lot of them are like, hell no.
Yes. So Mortellus, I'm so excited to have you on this channel. I know that you're like a third degree Gardnerian high priestess. You're a necromancer, a mortician.
I'm non-binary and I use the term priestess.
And I knew that about you, and I didn't realize it was priestess. I'm so excited that you corrected me. Thank you for doing that because I knew that you are non-binary and I wanted to make sure I had those terms correct. So thank you, thank you. But yeah, you have so many. When I was reading your biography before this, I was like, dang, they've got a lot of credentials. So if you just want to kind of briefly introduce yourself to everybody, and welcome to the channel.
I'm super bad at this. I always tell folks that I'm really terrible at being the used car salesman of Mortellus.
Yes, yes.
But I don't know, I do a lot of stuff, you're right. I like learning things. It feels like an act of rebellion to learn things, especially given my background. I grew up in an evangelical cult, which a lot of folks know about me. So they didn't believe that AFAB people should be educated. So after I ran away from home, it was like, learn all this stuff. My partner jokes that if I had a business card with everything, it would just unroll like a scroll, because it's like, I'm bored. I'm gonna go take the notary public certificate at the community college.
Nice.
So it's just a bunch of stuff like that. But my primary things are mortician, author, necromancer, witch, parent, spouse, all the big stuff that makes up your life. Caretaker of fur pupper.
Okay, we love that. Always here for the animals.
I am a failed foster of my dog. They've been with me for 13 years, forever. They've lived with me forever. We're supposed to just foster them.
I feel like it's so hard to let go of a dog though. Like once you have them in your home, it's like, well, that's it. That's the end.
And Donut is such a big lovable lump. Like,
that's so sweet. Do you feel like you would be comfortable sharing your origin story? Because I know everybody gives a little bit of an origin story. Feel free to share whatever you're comfortable with. But how did you come into the world of being a necromancer?
So I guess the big question is, I didn't ask you, is your show like PG? Can I just like drop
You
F
can
words?
be, oh, hell yeah, you can. Yeah, this is so unfiltered. I drop an F-bomb at least once in interview. So yeah.
Okay. So, and I guess some content warning, trigger warning, and I hope your audience will understand some days it's harder for me to talk about stuff. And this is one of those. So I will glaze over the origin story if that's okay, like a donut.
Yep.
When I was 5 years old, I was assaulted by a grown-ass man in our church. And that was very bad for me for all the reasons that just ran through your head, and I just don't want to talk about it. And then 3 days later happened to be Sunday morning, and they dragged me to the front of the church, and I had to apologize to this man for being a temptation and an agent of the devil, blah, blah, blah. It was all very horrible and dystopian, so I have to just hand wave at it sometimes. It's too much. But on that particular day, they preached a sermon about suicide and how it was a sin, and if you took your own life, you couldn't go to heaven or see your loved ones ever again, or your family or whatever. Being 5 years old, I thought, that sounds fucking great. It seemed awesome to me on that particular day. And I remember having the weirdest thought. It stands out to me in my memory because I look back on it and I have so much compassion for that 5-year-old kid, but I remember thinking, maybe the devil's a good guy. Subversive thought for a 5-year-old. I remember thinking, maybe hell is where the devil hides you from God's people. So I went home that night and I ate some medication that I had been told was not candy. And I remember going out into the hallway because it seemed like a place you went to places from. And I was trying to be really purposeful. I specifically wanted to not accidentally go to heaven. if I don't like smile my way through it, it's like really horrible to think about.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I remember having this entire experience of dying and being in the underworld and receiving a message from a being in the underworld, and I, woke up with a purpose. I knew what my life was going to be, and in reality, I was found unconscious and shuffled off to the hospital where I was in a coma for 4 days. And at the end, they tried to resuscitate me because I flatlined. They failed miserably, declared me dead, and I woke up 8 minutes later. When you spontaneously revive from death, it's called the Lazarus effect. There was a movie called that, if anyone's ever seen it. Something about a bunch of doctors like kill each other and then resuscitate each other after
Oh my
death
God.
so they can have near-death experiences.
Okay.
Crazy movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I came back with this purpose. Like, I knew what my work was going to be, and I had this connection to having been dead and remembering what I saw and experienced. I mean, here it was 4 days and some change, but in my memories it feels like years and years that I was there. Like I have this whole life that I remember. So I guess that's how I wound up being a necromancer.
Wow.
Not a very wholesome story, sorry.
No, thank you for sharing. I did not expect you to open up and even share that. So I appreciate you sharing what you did. And yeah, that's a lot that you went through. I won't drag that on because I know that we're just gonna.
It's a hard place for me because it's horrible and I never want to think about it or talk about it.
Yeah.
But it is a very real part of how I wound up here.
Yeah.
So sometimes, some days it's easier for me to talk about, and other days it's just like high points,
Yeah. That's very, very fair. Well, thank you for at least braving that a little bit and giving us kind of a little bit of a background.
Here's to ruining our mental health a little bit.
Oh gosh. Don't we all in the occult community, don't we all have mental health issues?
It's true for everybody, I think. I think we're all just,
yeah.
Who makes it to adulthood in one piece, right?
Right. And if you say you don't have mental health issues, you are repressing something. No, just kidding. But
probably though.
Yeah.
Probably.
Exactly. Thank you for knowing yourself. So let's talk about necromancy a little bit more then. So I think that the word carries so much connotation for so many people, and I kind of want to get into misconceptions, but I want to first ask you what being a necromancer means to you.
So I think much like the word witch, it's one of those things that deserves reclaiming. And it's funny how even within the pagan's an umbrella term and a terrible one at that. We don't really all fit under it very comfortably, but even within those communities, death work is still othered. So being other amongst othered people is a weird thing, but historically, whatever that means, it would have been used to refer to any magic or mundane practice that involved death or the dead. So a funeral director is practicing necromancy, a medium is practicing necromancy, your hospice nurse is practicing necromancy, you're a witch doing a spell to talk to a loved one is doing necromancy. So it's really anything in that bubble. It's not really until around the 15th century that we see that turn towards something silly and grave robby and skull pauldrons and green smoke and all the whatever you saw in a video game or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have to understand that some of those texts written in that time period they're written by popes. They're very anti-pagan propaganda, that kind of thing. So I'm just kind of taken aback.
I love that. I think one of the things that really shocked me the most about your book is that when I was reading it, I was like, holy shit, I'm a necromancer. And I didn't even realize it.
Yes. That's my whole thing. You got the soapbox. That's my whole thing. If I could really get anybody to take something away from that book, it would be that this isn't a book for someone who wants to do death work. It's for everybody.
Yeah, I so agree. You had all levels in there, all levels. And even some stuff, I mean, it was beginner friendly for sure, but there was some stuff that I was learning as well. I feel like it kind of tips into that intermediate advanced category. And I mean, you have some badass rituals, whatever. We're going to talk about your book later on. I'm going to try not to get carried away, but those rituals are so badass. I was like, Yes, when I was reading it, I was so excited. I'm like, let me just prick my finger right now and just start doing this. So I loved it.
You just leaned into one of those things that I think is really heavily stereotyped too, using blood for magic.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
think oh, go ahead.
for me, that's so mundane because I have a hypoglycemia issue, so I have to check my blood like 1,000 times a day. So but if you're a diabetic, you're so used to drawing a drop of blood that it's like so mundane you don't even think about it. But
Mm-hmm.
when somebody says use blood in magic, it's very, very spooky.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of that. And God, it doesn't have to be like a TV show where everybody's, why is it always the palm? That's
I
never
don't
gonna heal
know.
up. Oh, it's
Oh,
never gonna heal.
it's so not sustainable. Every time I do blood work, I think people are really shocked when I talk about it. And I'm like, it's literally the tiniest little finger prick ever. And I use a very clean, it's literally meant for people with like diabetes or whatever. You just have the little finger pricker. I'm like, it does not have to be the hand slash and all gory. And
You
yeah,
need a drop, a drop. And
yeah.
it's a gift of your life. And that's
Yes.
what makes it precious, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I do talk a bit about substitutions, and there are some great substitutions for blood if that's super not your bag or it isn't
Mhm.
safe for you, if you're a hemophiliac or something like that.
Mhm.
But there are so many safe, meaningful ways to use it as part of your practice, I think.
Yeah, you definitely had a lot of substitutions in there too, which I really appreciated because I know that people are sometimes a little squeamish when it comes to that. So I thought that was great to kind of add that into that. When you say that you're a necromancer, what is the reaction that you typically get with that? What are some misconceptions that you would like to kind of clear up?
Oh gosh, one of the first things I get is that people think I'm stealing from the dead. I get so many gotcha emails like, so where do you get this thing from? Or
What?
it's very silly. It'll be like, well, in your magic, you talk about using a dead person's clothes because that's actually a really common piece of magic
Yeah.
is to use clothing or shoes that belong to the dead. And I always tell people anything given enough time belonged to a dead person.
Mhm.
why why assume that I grave robbed something rather than I just have one of my grandma's old shirts
Yes.
or whatever? Like we all have those things in our lives. We just don't
Mhm.
apply that kind of meaning to them. Or corpse water, things like that, where they're like, well, how did you get this? And it's like, well, I asked if I could have that.
It's very ethical of you.
I asked. Oh, when I do work for folks, I never charge for funeral services. So
Mm.
if I'm there performing a funeral or embalming or preparing someone's loved one, I often ask them if I can keep something like that. If they
Mhm.
say no, that's fine. If they say yes, they know exactly what I'm doing with it. So it's,
And people are okay with that? I mean, people for the majority. Wow, I'm actually really surprised. I thought that you would be hit with a lot more resistance when it comes to that.
you'd be surprised. I mean, when people, it's amazing that when people get to know you, they know you're not a ghoul.
Yeah, yeah, for real.
So there's a lot of stuff like that where it's people just don't think outside the box really
Yeah.
with what's available to them. People ask me about coffin nails. One of my soapboxes is using authentic coffin nails for your work because I mean they're often made. Most of what you would buy have been imbued with the qualities of death rather than being from an actual coffin.
Sure.
And I talk about that a lot. And they're like, well, how are you getting them if you're not digging someone up? It's like, do you have any idea how many caskets and coffins wind up in landfills every day?
Oh,
Truly,
I actually
every
didn't know
day.
that. Oh, interesting.
I truly think that one of the biggest foundational ideas you can associate with necromancy is recycling
Mm-hmm.
because the death industry has so much waste.
Mm.
I just go at the end of a Saturday and walk through your local cemetery, and you'll just see dumpsters full of flowers. I often collect those and use them to make incense or oils or other things.
Mm-hmm.
Caskets, if they've, let's say we've disinterred someone for forensic purposes, they have to be reinterred in a new burial container because the old one won't be structurally sound for moving. So the old one, landfill.
Wow. I guess I didn't
Casket,
realize that.
caskets are rented out for viewings before cremation. It'd be very wasteful to buy an expensive casket to cremate, and they're recycled over and over. But if
Mm.
they go out of fashion, like a new style is the thing, or they get stained or damaged in some way, Uncle Lou spilled wine in it or bumped
Sure.
into it, scratched it up, they will be decommissioned as a rental and straight to the landfill. So I stay in touch with funeral directors I know in funeral homes, and when there are instances like that, I'll go collect them, take
Yeah.
them apart, and use the wood to make candle wicks or collect all the coffin nails and that kind of thing. So
I love how you said that the one takeaway is that it's really good at recycling the whole world of necromancy and death, because you're so right. I mean, the whole symbolism of death, you're recycling back into the earth and et cetera, et cetera. So I
I,
like you said that.
I tell people that they're doing necromancy every day and they don't think about it. When you're doing things like composting, for example,
Hmm.
every time you put gasoline in a car, we're running cars off the bones of creatures we'll never imagine knowing.
Hmm.
When you microwave leftovers, you're doing necromancy.
I didn't even think about it like that.
You're
Yeah.
taking something's remains, you're reanimating them so you can derive life from them.
Oh, that just gave a whole new perspective for my kitchen witchery. Like, I'm really excited about that.
I teach a whole workshop on necromantic kitchen magic.
Oh,
If you come hang
yes.
out. Yes.
Okay, I'm definitely doing that. That
And
sounds
I always tell
fantastic.
I tell people, so for people listening, I think there should never be a financial barrier between you and access to knowledge. So
Mm.
if you can't afford to attend a workshop, they are always pay what you want, and that amount can be zero if you need it to be. So
That is very, very generous for you to do. I think
come
that's
sign up for tons of workshops. Come to all of them. I don't care.
yes, yes. I love that. Okay, so if people need to sign up after listening to this because that sounds awesome. What do you think are so as far as now that we've kind of gone through some misconceptions, what do you feel like your biggest hurdles have been? So becoming a necromancer and kind of working through that world, and it can be literally anything. It can be dealing with other people, it can be dealing with the dead, whatever.
I don't know. I like my work with the dead. I think it sounds funny to say I love working with the dead or I like doing funeral because it sounds like you're enjoying a thing that brings people grief. But I like my work.
Mm-hmm.
Someone has to be doing it or people don't have someone there for them on their worst day.
Right.
So it's not that. And it's not always other people, but what jumped to mind was it's really seen as a boys' club, quote
Mm.
unquote. I mean, if you think of people in the death care community, unless you're thinking about the death positivity movement, you probably thought of masculine people, AMAB people.
Sure.
And I do think that in a lot of ways, there's, and I'm not speaking to every person, but just sort of broadly, there is a drive in some of those figures to lean into the stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are always going to be people who enjoy the stereotypes. I'm very spooky and I wear a lot of eyeliner or whatever. I don't think that's good for the community or the message. So it's hard to step in and stand out from that when you're seen as being fluffy or taking like a gentle stance toward death work. Because I am looking outside the box and I'm looking at it, I'm looking outside the casket. I'm looking at it more inclusively as kind of a broad picture of how death affects our daily life.
Yeah.
It's seen as, well, you're not tough enough to go the extra mile and grave rob or whatever. And
Okay.
I don't want to. No, thanks.
It's disrespectful, but
I don't have to do that stuff. And it's also terrible.
mm-hmm.
I think too there's a lot of cis heteronormity in that kind of magic. Particularly, you'll see a lot of texts that really suggest that masculine people, men, AMAB people are more effective at death magic, which I think is pure nonsense. You read my book, I think that's nonsense.
Yeah.
But it is a pervading attitude surrounding
Wow.
necromantic magic.
I can't believe that's still a thing. That's
Definitely.
actually really surprising to me because when I think of necromancy, I always think, I don't know why, but I associate necromancy with more like if we're going to go to the traditional binary of masculine and feminine, which is a whole nother conversation, but I associate it a little bit more with like feminine energy than masculine energy. But that's just me. So like I think that's really interesting that there is this masculine whatever. Continue on with what you're saying. I'm just ranting.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the things that's hard for me is sort of standing out from the crowd. And I think
Yeah.
there's that whole thing when you are feminine presenting or AFAB, or especially if you're trans or non-binary like myself,
Mm-hmm.
you're always going to get up one day and find a person who's never spoken to you before rehashing something you said yesterday as their own words, which happens all the time. It's really frustrating.
Excuse me?
I said that in an interview last night and now it's your blog.
Okay, that's cool. So sorry.
Like, and that sounds like petty nonsense, but like that's the thing that jumped to mind when you asked the question.
Mhm.
So
No, that's fair. That is a very fair answer. I'm glad that you were honest, that it's more about the culture of necromancy that's been the biggest for you. Oh my gosh. So you said something really interesting in your book, and it was in the very beginning, and I wanted to address this before we go into the rest of our conversation because I feel like it's really important. But you mentioned the word Eidolon, and I almost mispronounced it because it's Eidolon, right? Or is it Eidolon?
I always pronounce it Eidolon. That's not
Okay.
precisely correct. It's actually somewhere in the middle of what we both said. So we can
Okay.
fight about it. It's
Yeah, I was wondering because in my head it's Eidolon, but then when I looked at the pronunciation, it was like Eidolon. Anyways, not that it really matters too much, but if you can kind of elaborate on that term for anybody watching this that hasn't read the book yet, there is a point made towards the beginning of the book, so I'm not spoiling anything, that you prefer that term versus ghost. So if you would like to elaborate.
I'll use you as a foil if that's okay.
Yeah.
Define the word ghost.
Someone who is dead, usually a person, or almost always a person if it's a ghost. That's
That's
my
what we
definition.
that's what we think of,
Yeah,
but those are really personal definitions. It's not really what the word means
sure.
per se. It means an incorporeal manifestation.
Oh, wow. Well, my personal definition is so wrong. I
I,
usually relate it
I
to
think a lot
humans.
a
Yeah.
lot of people would describe it the way you did,
Hmm.
but I really love words, and I think knowing what a word means can really alter your magic. It's a
Yeah.
really useful thing to do, to dig into the etymology of words. I'm fascinated with that because I'm a big nerd with neurodivergences.
Mhm.
That's where my hyperfocus lives often. So looking at that over time, I came to realize it wasn't a really useful word for me because it means so much, but also it means very little because it means so much. And you said a dead person,
Hmm.
but that also leaves out animals,
Hmm.
and it leaves out manifestations of living people. For example, there's an entire school of thought that believes that poltergeist activity is often a manifestation of the living, particularly children in traumatic situations. So that word just doesn't describe all the things we need it to describe, while including things we don't need, like deities, fae, elementals, all kinds of beings. So I prefer Eidolon because it means an incorporeal manifestation of a living or dead being. So it refers to creatures that are or have been living, so it includes animals, but it includes the living, the same as the dead.
I really liked your definition of that because when I read that, I was kind of reflecting on my own vocabulary. I never use the word ghost. I am almost always using the word spirit because I feel like the word spirit is just so much broader. But the problem with spirit is that it's not just human, it's not just animal, it's also non-human and non-animal. It's this big umbrella term for, I
Right.
mean, you could probably even put fey creatures under spirit and a bunch of other things. So I like the term Eidolon because it's a little bit more specific. So yeah.
It means only what we want it to mean and no extra
Right.
thing.
Would you clarify, because you just mentioned offline that there is an association with the word Eidolon, and you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
So I wanted to, everyone can watch me like search a word in my own book, which isn't that fun for all of you to watch?
I love it.
I was going to give you a particular reference for the use of term, which I think is excellent. It's D. Felton's Haunted Greece and Rome, Ghost Stories from Classical Antiquity. So if you are that kind of academia dork, you will enjoy reading that book.
Love it.
That's where you can find some historical use from antiquity of that word in that way. But people often ask me, because they know that I'm just a big dork, if I got the word from either Dungeons and Dragons or Final Fantasy, because the word shows up in both of those games to refer to beings or figures. And the answer is not no. It's also not yes.
Hmm.
They all exist in my periphery. So I think you take your inspirations where you get them from, right?
I love that. It's very chaos magic of you because I don't know if you know, but like chaos magic is my thing. That's primarily what I do. And so there were a couple points. There was actually, what did I use? I used orange for chaos magic because
I was going to say you might enjoy that. My nerdery does leak out in this book, so you probably saw references to video games and comic
Mhm.
books and music and all kinds of stuff. But one thing that is one of my many soapboxes, look at all the varied hills on which I grow my specific books. very
Yes.
specific. I think there is still a lot of ugliness left over from Satanic Panic. And one of those things is that people who enjoy gaming in the pagan community are scared to say so because people think they got all their magic from video games since it's not real somehow. Somehow it's less real if we're inspired in that way.
Sure.
And people in the gaming community are scared to say they're pagan because people will think they're Satanists and you'll get thrown out of stores. I used to run tabletop RPGs at a local store, and they
Fun.
Someone found out that I was pagan, and they asked me not to run games anymore for kids because they were afraid that kids' parents wouldn't let them come to the stores.
Are
So
you kidding me?
It's still a whole thing, right? So
Wow.
one of my big things is like bringing those communities back together, and I teach a workshop about that too, the intersection between magic and play, and I think that's hugely impactful. So I reached out to Paizo, the publisher of Pathfinder RPG, which is one of my favorites.
Yes.
And asked their permission to take a ritual from the game and write it into a real world ritual, which is in the book.
Yes.
And there is a fictional deity in that world setting called Pharasma. And if you have done a deep dive of that game, you would know that Pharasma has a holy text in that world setting called The Bones Fall in a Spiral. And I got their permission to use that title for the book.
I love that. Was one of my questions, is where you got the inspo for the title. But yeah, I love that so much. I'm a gamer too, and I just resonated so. There are so many points throughout the book because I'm always looking for a little bit of chaos magic. Even if people don't say that they're into chaos magic, I'm like, that could be. So yeah, I really love that you utilize that. I think that's really cool.
Well, I'm dying to know what your orange tab is stuck to. I really want to know.
Let's see. Oh, it was on page 19. You said, I used the Dark Souls video game franchise as a metaphor for reincarnation, using tabletop role-playing games as a teaching tool and using the polyhedral dice for divination. And within these very pages, you'll find the references to Pharasma, which you talked about, a fictional deity and of death, et cetera, et cetera. So I had to tag that because I was like, oh, that's so cool. It was just a little premonition of what I was going to read the rest of the book. So I had to put a little orange tab on it.
Nerd stuff leaks all over my writing. You see it in my first book too. Just I'm always pretty sure people are just sick to death of that when I'm writing.
No, literally never. Oh my gosh, keep it coming. I think that's so fantastic. Okay, so let's move on to the next question I had for you. What are some of the most important things for people that are wanting to work with spirits to remember?
To remember that they're people.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have a lot of sort of internalized fears about working with death, and I could sit here all day and give you a literal lecture with sources about why and where those came from, and most of them fall out of the 1970s, and some of them fall out of Cold War era stranger danger. We're all scared that everybody was a Russian spy. But at the end of the day, I think working with the dead is remembering that they're human beings and that they're not frightening in the way we assume. I mean, one of the most common questions I get when I teach workshops about necromancy or mediumship or that sort of thing is, how do I protect myself? What do I do if I encounter something scary? That sort of thing. And I always encourage people to take a moment to consider their local Walmart. Imagine you are there on a Saturday morning and it's very busy and very crowded. You probably don't want to talk to anybody. They probably all seem terrible. Do not speak to me. Thanks.
Sure.
I was at Walmart recently and I was getting some produce, and a guy just wanders up to me and says, pick me out 5 or 6 good apples. Just, no?
What?
Go away. I don't want to do that for you. He says, oh, you're not going to do me like that, are you?
What?
Here. Just demanding stuff. Where do old white guys get the audacity?
I don't know, but it's so far up there.
Imagine that's you, you're picking out your fruit, really hoping that guy will go away. Now, the odds of someone in that store being truly evil, wishing you harm, having malicious intent is so infinitesimal statistically as to be uncountable. It's less than 0. We're talking like serial killers, like truly malicious people. Not someone who's having a bad mental health day and did a bad thing in a moment. We're talking about evil people.
Yeah.
But also, the odds of there being someone truly benevolent and good are also 0, less than 0. There's not a Florence Nightingale at the checkout line ready to award you $1 million. It's not happening.
It's truth.
Human beings are varied shades of gray. We're pranksy dorks. We don't like to be bothered. We're just doing our best to get by with the experience that we have. Now take that person, you, in the Walmart produce section, hoping someone doesn't talk to you, and make it so nobody spoke to you meaningfully in like 100 years. And the first thing they do is plow into your house uninvited and start shouting at you about, are you a man or a woman? How did you die?
Yeah.
Do you believe in God? Are you the police? And so,
yes.
remember that they're people and speak to them like people, and really realize that the likelihood of it being a truly bad experience is approximately none. You should be far more afraid of the living than the dead.
Yeah. Oh God, that's so true. I get this. I'm going to deviate for a second because I just had a question pop up. I get this question so much and I'm curious to know your thoughts. Well, I get it in a slightly different variation, but same idea. Would you recommend necromancy to someone who is incredibly fearful of working with any sort of spirits? Or because I know there's like kind of two different camps where some people are like, no, don't do it because your fear is just going to make you have a shitty experience. And then other people are saying, yes, try it because it might actually help you with that. So what is your opinion on that?
I had someone ask me pretty much that exact question Saturday morning, standing in Graceland Cemetery in Chicago, teaching a workshop about mediumship.
Yeah.
And I will tell you what I told them. Get to know people, period. If you can go to a class or a workshop or a party or a mixer at a bar, and you can take some time to talk to another human being, one, not only will that help you with your magic, make you a better communicator, it's going to help you in your day-to-day life with those fears. But talking to the dead is not different. These are still people. It's a very low-stakes environment. And people tend to be compassionate toward other people. I was afraid flying to Chicago. I don't fly much and I didn't like it. And the stranger next to me noticed and reached out and held my hand. Stranger.
Oh.
Total stranger. The compassion that human beings tend to have for one another is vast. Given the opportunity, we want to be kind. So just say to the dead, feeling a little nervous, and I just wanted to talk to you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Let them know that you're afraid. These are people. So learning to socially navigate real world settings and learning to socially navigate spirit settings, they're going to help each other.
I love that answer so much. I think that's something similar to what I say in a different respect, because I don't get asked about necromancy specifically, but when I talk about working with spirits, I get that question a lot. And I don't think people should let their fear dictate their lives. I think that it's something that can be worked through. So I love that you said that. I think it's so true. And the more exposure that you have, the more you realize, oh, it's really not a scary thing. It's not scary at all. I used to be terrified of the dark, terrified of any spooky spirits or whatever. And now I work with them regularly and I feel totally comfortable. So
I'll give you a hot take.
Okay.
Very hot take.
Love it.
I think witches don't like working with the dead because it makes them feel powerless.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. Okay, elaborate.
Witches, myself included, we all like to say stuff like, I could never be cursed because I'm too well warded. I have protections. Or my house is warded to the nines. You know, I have sigils and hex bags and stuff. Like, this is never. We like to feel in control, and that's because our lives are often out of control. We don't like to remember that we're human beings with crappy part-time jobs and who might get fired tomorrow and be evicted. Like, life is scary, and we like the parts we have control over, but we don't have control over death. Death finds us wherever death wants to find us. And people say, the dead can't visit me here because I've warded, have shielded. But that's a lie you're telling yourself, because death goes where death wants to be.
That's true.
And when you're reminded of that in the dark, in your house, walking to get water at 2 a.m, and you see someone, it scares you. Because you don't feel like you're in control. But just remember that they too are feeling just as powerless. It's a space that they want to occupy that maybe feels like home to them. And they don't have any control over the fact that you live there now.
I think that's, I don't know if that's even a hot take. I think you're like spot on with that. If anybody is offended in the comments, then they can just go away. No, I'm just kidding.
Write me hate mail. We can fist fight outside of
Right.
Chili's.
Right,
It's fine.
exactly. It's
I tell
whatever.
people I don't want to know your favorite song or your zodiac sign. I want to know the song you would fight your boss to outside of Chili's.
Yeah.
I don't know why Chili's is the place to have a fist fight. It just
Chili's
is.
is always the place to have a fist fight. Like, what are you talking about? That's amazing.
Show you my little ghosty sitting on my desk because they're
That
the
is
best.
so cute. Oh my gosh. I love that so much. Oh gosh, now I'm just curious about all your home decor and
Oh, I've got all kinds of little tchotchkes. These are all things people have sent me that I keep on my desk. It
oh
reminds me that there are people listening.
yes, there are definitely people listening. And I think that this is a subject that never gets enough light. And so I think that I love that you are kind of like breaking the traditional roles of it and really being a voice in the community. So props to you. I think that's fantastic. So let's kind of switch it from talking about fear and getting over fear and all of that. I want to talk about the most rewarding part of this entire practice for you and just kind of like shed some more light on it.
Oh gosh. The most rewarding is when I get messages from people and they say, "Hey, I was having my worst day because my loved one died and I found your book and this helped me."
Oh,
And I get those all the time. I mean, a lot of my work is people emailing me because they're having a hard time with a funeral home and they're trying to navigate a meaningful experience and they're in the middle of the worst day of their life. Now, can you please help me figure this out? And I'm calling some funeral home in a flyover state at 2 a.m, trying to help a stranger. Because that comes back around to that humanity element, that helplessness, and that compassion.
mm-hmm.
That's me holding someone's hand on a plane.
Yeah.
I don't have to be there for them or answer that message, but I do. And I'm glad I can be there for people and show them compassion when they don't have someone else.
That's a fantastic answer. I really love that. I think that you are helping so many people, definitely. So, would you be willing to maybe share one of your most rewarding experiences, like a specific, if you're open to, you don't have to if you don't want to, but a specific Eidolon that you happened to work with that was just really memorable for you? What was that experience like?
Oh gosh, I think that gets way hard into like personal woo-woo, right? Like,
Oh, sure.
I'm a big advocate of sharing that stuff as long as you're saying this is my weird. This is
Yeah.
my weird.
Yeah, of course.
You read the books, you probably see me talk a lot about personal UPG, and I think if we're not sharing UPG, we're not saying anything new.
Mm-hmm.
But sharing UPG is also really vulnerable, and you have to be so clear about it. Like, this is my stuff.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're all just rehashing the same crappy high school essay with the same sources, right? We're not
Dude, seriously.
every book starts to feel the same after a while.
Yeah.
So hopefully when you read it, you felt like you were at least reading something new. I hope.
I definitely did. Also, side note, my dog is groaning in the background, so I'm really sorry if you can hear that, but he's a grunty boy. So anyway, sorry, continue.
Let's see. I don't know. I think memorable is a stretch because there's so much. Everybody's an individual, right? A unique person. And I too like to think that I'm very protected from dealing with the dead where I don't have to, but it's a lie, you see. Because the dead do what they want to do. So probably the most memorable are two that I just can't really get rid of that just live in my house every day to be a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And one is my spouse's grandmother. And she's the most hella extra, like a Connecticut grandma you ever thought of. Like, she has opinions and wants her children to be baptized. We're not Catholic, stop.
Okay.
So that's a whole thing. Real talk. I think she just likes that I can see her and she enjoys the attention. So that's the only reason. That's the only reason she's around. But there's that, and there's one of my coven students' father passed away a few years ago, and I was there for them for that, and prepared their body and on all those things. And we thought that they were going to be a problem for my coven student because their relationship was a little tragic at times. So I politely insisted that their spirit come live with me. Let's don't go be a problem for people you've already traumatized in their life.
Yeah.
And they are so extra. They think that it's very funny to try and be like spooky horror movie ghost, but they're bad at it. So it's just like dorky bald dad popping up like
Oh,
Jump scare style, and it's like, please don't. Please do not.
yes. That's hilarious.
They also dress like a character from Miami Vice. It's all like cargo shorts and Hawaiian shirts, and it's like, man, you're not scary.
Yeah.
Probably not the kind of story you wanted, but that's the one you have gotten.
No, I love it. Any stories are valuable stories, definitely. I think it adds a picture to people who don't practice any sort of necromancy, what some sort of Eidolon can even look like. It can be that weird uncle trying to be scary but not scary.
Right. And I don't know, I think I get this idea that like people experiencing the dead or seeing them, or particularly people that have visual manifestations, we think it's going to be like that, what the movie The Sixth Sense or whatever, like each image you see is going to be really specifically impactful. It's going to be affected by it. But why do we insist that the dead be associated with their traumas? Why do we want that from them? That's horrible. Like, why do you want the person who died in a car wreck to always look like they were just in a car wreck? Like,
yeah,
why can't they live their afterlife being a person? They're still people, right? So it's been my experience that they're often goofy and flawed and annoying sometimes and funny sometimes, and please go away, touchy uncle sometimes.
right. Yeah.
Because they're still humans.
Yes, you talked a lot about in your book, you talked about different parts of the soul, and you talked about, so this is what I find really interesting. Okay, tangent time. You and I are so different, and I love that because you're a hard polytheist, right? I think, yes, a hard polytheist, whereas I am more of I'm not an atheist anymore, but I'm like coming out of atheism and really trying to be more open-minded. And so reading your book and learning about your perspective on the different parts of the soul and also just death and how the whole cycle of death works, it was so fascinating for me. And I ate that up and I loved it so much. So thank you for that, by the way, because that's something that I would not have considered at all previously.
I think, and I say this in the book, there's so many kinds of magic that really don't require any kind of belief. Cool, great, awesome. But necromancy does at least you require that you believe there's something after death. It does necessitate that, right? So that's kind of a different place, and I think I do mention it in there, but it's one of those areas where I can't help but have my own personal experience leak into my work, because I've been dead and I experienced something, and I encountered deceased individuals, and I encountered what I believe was a deity, and that really affected who I later became as a witch, because I can't separate that experience from what I do now, because I met an individual that presented a certain way. I am thus a hard polytheist.
Yes. Yeah. I thought that was really impactful. And this is why it's so important for anybody listening to not just read the same stuff in your echo chamber, to go and read things from people with different perspectives, because I think it's important to change our minds about things all the time. And what I read in your book, I was like, I'm going to read it a second time and really, really digest the different parts of the soul part, because that part was like really, really fascinating for me.
It really is. It's such a modern idea and a very Christian idea to think of the soul as one thing. Like you die right now and you fall over and there's one of you, right?
Right.
It's very modern, very modern. So I've not worked with that in a really long time.
Yeah. No, I loved that. I think that was a great explanation. We already kind of talked about where you got the inspiration for the title, but can you tell me what was kind of your inspiration when writing the book? Like, are there any other authors that inspired you, or just works in general?
Have you ever had just experiences of something that are so bad that you're like, I'm going to be the opposite of that?
Yes, I have.
So if you want to learn about necromancy, there's stuff, but most of it is not good stuff. I've probably got the only bibliography that has a disclaimer at the beginning of it. Like I had to cite a lot of terrible stuff. I don't believe all of it.
Yeah.
Tread with caution. And in realizing that, over the course of my own life, that I never really relied on any of that material because it's either incomplete, it's not practice oriented, it's scholarly, or it's completely UPG, like a book like the one I picked up. This is often referred to as like the go-to. It has no citations and it's almost entirely UPG.
Oh, interesting.
No bibliography. So it's treated as empirical, and it has a lot of really harmful ideas, a lot of racist ideas, a lot of Christian ideas, a lot of homophobic ideas. It's rough. And this is the one that people get referred to. And that's very sad to me. Please don't go buy new copies. The person who currently owns the copyright is a fascist. So
good to know. We're not promoting that.
Don't give them money. So I wanted to write the thing that I would have wanted when I was younger. I say as though I'm 1,000 years old. But I think that's what we do, right? We try and patch the gaps in the world, what we didn't have. Like, I imagine you're making content you wished you had had.
That's exactly right. It's the same in the chaos scene. Although I will say there are so many people in chaos magic that I really do look up to for inspiration. But there are also so many people that I'm like, this is atrocious and I need to do something about this.
Yes.
So yeah.
I had just read one too many things that was just bad or specifically dangerous. There are some books I talk about within this text where it's like, this has advice that will literally get you killed. So I wanted people to have something that was safe and inclusive of both practice and history, and something that they could rely on, if nothing else. Even if you hate the book, if you hate everything I had to say, the bibliography at least is a source that is complete.
Yes. One of my favorite things about your book, I'm going to, let's see, where are we? I'm going to literally show this up on the screen.
It's embarrassing. I know. I know what you're going to do.
Sorry to embarrass you. No, it's going to be good. You guys, hold on. Can I get this to look at all them sources cited at the bottom of a page? Just, yes.
I thought you were going to show people how much is bibliography.
Oh, that too. I was going to show that. Like, the bibliography is literal pages and pages.
It's 13 pages.
Yeah, it is so long. But the fact that you also have in the little footnotes or whatever, that you have your sources there as well that directly correlate to what you were just talking about, that's so much work to do. Like, I can't even imagine how much time that took just to source your material like that. And I so appreciated that. Fantastic job. I love it.
Nothing just crawls up my butt worse than opening a book and there being no footnotes or no bibliography. Or the bibliography is one page and it's all YouTube videos or something, which
I tell people do that. Oh my God.
When you are reading a book, I'll give your readers a little tip, fun little tip.
Yes.
Let's open a window here because I want to make sure. So, something you see in academia, it's called the crap test.
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah. Okay.
It's how you determine if a source of information is worth a crap. So, one, check it for currency. Is the source reliable? Do you trust them? I'm a mortician, so you could assume I probably know some stuff about death and dying, probably. I'm a third-degree Gardnerian, so you can assume I at least know things about traditional Wicca, that sort of stuff. So check the currency as compared to what you're reading. 2, relevance. When looking at sources, are the sources relevant to the content? Is it focused on the intended audience? That sort of thing. 3, authority. What is their authority within the community? Who are they as an educator? What can this person teach you? That kind of thing. Accuracy, which is trustworthiness of sources, whether they are current or specifically relevant. That's a little different with a work that has a lot of academic citations where you're citing a lot of things from antiquity, but if they're citing modern things, look at their relevance and their accuracy, that sort of thing. And lastly, the purpose. What is the purpose of the work? Why did they write it? What purpose does it serve? For me, the purpose of this text is, like I said, the texts that we had were either A, academic, or B, not practice-oriented, and if they were, they weren't complete. So I wanted a work that was all of those things.
Yes.
So it's a good little test if the book's worth it for you.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I use the crap test literally all the time, especially for my school endeavors, but yes.
I always tell people you can get good things from a bad book or a bad author. You can get bad things from a good book or a good author. Read everything, just have a critical eye.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be looking for nothing but good just because you like an author, or nothing but bad just because you dislike an author. absorb stuff because you can.
I wanted to ask you too, this is something that I like to ask authors in general, just because I'm always curious, but what is something, if you had to totally boast about yourself, which I know people are usually not comfortable doing, but what is something that you feel like you did so well in this book that you were just so proud of yourself for?
Oh gosh. What am I so proud of in this book? Can it just be that it exists?
Yes.
That's hard.
Yeah.
Yep. And I switched publishers in between. It was a whole thing making this exist for all of you. I wrote
Oh,
this book like
wow.
3 years ago, and I'm only just seeing its birth, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Um, I'm proud of pretty proud of the second half, the spell book shaped, because I don't think you'll see anything like that in the world. I mean, you're not going to see a necromancy book that has like a wheel of the year set of rituals. That's me being a weirdo.
Sure. Sure.
But yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. It's giving people a way to walk away from the text feeling like they have stuff they can put in their daily practice.
Yeah, I think you did that so well, and I really loved your coffin sigils because you have these. Well, I don't think you call them sigils. I call them sigils in my brain, but the coffin.
Sigils, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, but the coffin sigils that you have for your rituals, and every coffin is a little bit different. I loved that so much. I thought that was so cool.
I do a lot of sigil work, and I worked them all into the same container shape because I wanted them to have something common between them. I think people don't really know this, but my first 2 degrees were in arts. I have a degree in fine arts, and I'm a painter, and in graphics and advertising, and I do a lot of my own design work. But and then mortuary science as an education. But when you can add something cohesive, I think it feels good in your brain meets. So I made everything be one shape.
That is so interesting. I didn't know that about you. I didn't realize that you are an artist as well. Okay, that makes sense because I was like, these are beautiful. I could never. I am not a drawer. That's not my thing. So fantastic job. I loved it.
Yeah, I did all the design. I did the cover art and the illustrations inside. There are 2 illustrations that my partner did, which I'm glad we got to work together on. But the altar illustration and the bone violet, that spiral illustration, they did. So.
Yes. Oh gosh, that is really cool. I just want to reiterate again, I really love this book. For anybody watching this, please consider picking this up if you are interested in necromancy. So just to clarify, Mortellus's publisher actually reached out to me and sent me this book. And I was originally just supposed to read it and give my honest review or whatever. But after reading it, I was like, no, I need to meet Mortellus and we need to have an interview because it was just that good. And I don't want to, I know I'm not supposed to say this because I probably shouldn't, but I think this is one of my favorites of this whole year that I've read. Like it's so delicious and I really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, just don't tell anybody else. It'll just be us and everyone else listening to this, knowing that this is my favorite.
Very small group of people. No, that means a lot to me. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Did you have any final thoughts on the subject of necromancy or being a mortician or anything that you feel like we didn't cover that you want to address?
I would just say, referencing the epilogue of the book, just remember that death is a gatherer, not a hunter. They're not out to get you or hurt you. And death isn't something to be afraid of. It's something that's just waiting for you like a friend at the end of your life. So don't forget that death is part of your everyday, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah. Fantastic closing. I love that. Thank you, Mortellus, for being here. I really appreciate you. Thank you to everyone watching, and I will see you all in another video soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.